All right, we're live. I used to always start it like, welcome to another episode of and I just stopped doing that in the last few episodes just because I felt like I was becoming a robot. So, Daniel, thank you for joining me, brother.
Good to be here. Always love our conversations.
Likewise, we meet every Saturday. We have a men's group, and that's an open invitation to whoever's interested. So, just to get right into it, what's been on my mind is this movie Revolver. I painfully made him watch these two scenes before we started the video. And one of the reasons I love the movie, highly recommend it, is because I think it portrays the internal battle that most of us face, all of us face, um, of how I perceive it to identify which thoughts are real and which are not. I think God is the voiceless voice. We can hear it in different experiences in our life, whether it be traumatic or whether it be sought after. I think God works in mysterious ways, so it'll be different for each of us. But I do believe the prescription is seek and you will find. And paradoxically, it's not this seeking mind. It's often in this meditative state, prayer, a hunger for the truth. You know, what do I do? Who do I trust? Those moments of when we are weakest, we can find that when we're humbly seeking Him. So I guess the to make this a question and to open it up for discussion is, how do you know how can we? What are maybe some things that we can identify? Who is the which thoughts are real and which aren't for you?
It's a good question. I think because the realms of both God and the enemy, Satan, whatever you want to call him, are so vastly different. The hard part would be determining which thoughts are mine and which thoughts are the enemy's versus which thoughts are God's and which thoughts are mine. Is my thoughts are going to be self-centered. God's influence in me is not. So I can more easily determine a charitable thought being the influence of God because I, as a base human creature, am generally default selfish and self absorbed. So if I have a thought of I should help this other person without a thought of what do I gain from helping this other person, then I would determine that to be God's influence working through me. It's that calling that we as Christians talk about. With the enemy, I think, though, it's more difficult to see because the enemy is trying to trick us through ourselves. So it influences those self absorbed thoughts. Maybe the only way to really determine that is to grow close enough in one's journey to feel the calling and then see the opposition to that calling, because that's what it is. In order to bring us further away from God, then the enemy would try to distract us away from the callings that we receive, those sensations, I guess. Yeah, sensations, because it's not so much a thought like you should go do this. It's a feeling
Yeah.
of I'm meant to be here and to do this thing, and I can't stop thinking about it. Which the enemy would then say, for example, well, what are you getting out of being there? Why would you even go there in the first place? Question it. I think the simplicity of Christianity is to stop questioning God. Because we do that in our heads all the time. Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? What does this mean? What does that mean? The pursuit of knowledge is to ask questions, but God is never going to take us down a road that would destroy us. So why do we need to question where he wants us to go? That's the complex issue. Is how do we stop questioning the Almighty, who has that, like we've talked about on Coffee and Christ, that agape love for us. How do we stop questioning God's motivation? And once we figure that out, the enemy has less control over us, because all it can do is manipulate us through question.
Yeah, I think of the temptation of Christ.
Yep.
Interesting. So all the enemy can do is, well, yeah, then we believe in the lie.
Right. But the lie isn't an overt lie. It's not like our brains go, this is what I think, and I know that this is wrong. The lie is always starts with a question. Is this important to me?
Jim Rohn comes to mind.
As an individual human being, is this important to me, Daniel? Like, I have that God calling, I should go here. But then that little question in the back of my mind, why? We love the question because it helps us reason things out. That's part of our discussions, even on Coffee and Christ. Why? Take it back to childhood. But the childhood innocence is not a question of why from a place of what good is it to me. It's a question of simple direction. What happens when I get there? Because it's not saying why should I go there, it's saying what's going to happen when I get there.
Yeah, and I think the why too is painful. I mean, you look at the disciples of Christ and what's their end goal of why? It's persecution. And I kind of,
they question Jesus.
Yeah, because I think there's a healthy questioning, and then because you have fear of God, right? But then you have the spirit of fear.
I'm not sure it's fear of God so much as fear of proof.
Break that down.
So, for example, the concept of doubting Thomas.
Yeah,
doubting Thomas didn't believe that Jesus could have risen from the dead and walked out of his tomb. He needed proof. And the only way that he could get that proof was if Jesus came to him after dying and showed him. And that's what it says in the Bible. It showed him the wounds. He was able to touch those wounds on Jesus' physical form in order to prove that he got up and walked away from being hung on the cross and stabbed in the side, things we know to be deadly to mortals. And he was walking around showing those wounds off for, just as a dramatic euphemism. We as people constantly look for proof of things, and that's what I'm talking about. It's the enemy gets into the why because we're looking for proof. So the question is, why would I go there if it doesn't benefit me in any way? Because it benefits everyone, because you're working God's will and you need to be in that location in order to do so.
Yeah, which is a element of surrender and faith.
Correct. That's the crux of faith, is not needing proof. That's what the doubting Thomas story is all about. The crux of faith is I don't need proof to know that God is there. That's why we call it believing.
Yeah. And
but your paradox, you can also believe a lie. And that's where the enemy gets in.
Yeah.
You put your faith in a lie.
Yeah, that led me to the Um, Apathy is often disguised as neutrality because embedded in that is this element of I don't have to do anything, which led to serenity prayer. Give me the strength. Uh, I always botch it. I always botch a serenity prayer now that
Well, break that down for me because I'm not following.
because apathy is often disguised as neutrality, meaning that because one of the reasons I kind of entered the arena, I speak about it all the time, was COVID, and I
Mhm.
recognized that, and I learned many lessons in that as well because I felt called to speak what I believed to be true, um, because I just felt such subversion of lies and anyway, I felt that there was it was in my control to speak what I believed to be true. What I learned in the experience was that I can't make anybody believe what I believe, even
Yeah.
if I am right. So, and that taught me surrender. I speak what I believe, and the chips may fall where they will. The
Right.
faith element as well tied into it because there was still the element of control. Um, as I was surrendered, it was like I'll accept whatever it is if I get. If I have to go to jail, I'll go to jail, and I had to watch the pride behind that. I'll go to jail, beating my
Yeah.
chest, but it was almost it shifted into kind of an adventure. I'm not going to lash back at anybody. I'm not going to be angry. I'm going to try to articulate. I'm going to try to be empathetic because a lot of people on both sides were quote unquote good. Some people, and I do believe there was a small minority that was truly evil. And I can't just put on my no exactly, but I can use my reasoning to maybe identify roots, testing spirits, right? Why do you believe this? Why do you believe that, etc. But to the main point, the apathy and neutrality and the surrender element is because when you use the word surrender, what comes to mind is one, surrender can be apathetic. So if the surrender comes from ego, if surrender comes from, I don't even want to engage in this, we're not going to talk politics or religion, it can be from the position of, I don't want to talk about it because I'm afraid of differing opinions and I don't want to engage in it all. And neutrality, saying the same thing, and it's actually coming from a higher truth, meaning that it's coming from, I don't want to discuss this because um it's not the right, maybe that's not the best way. It's coming from a place of, it's not the right time to discuss this. It's coming from the place of, I mean, the words will come to me, but there's a time and a place. There's context behind it. I think as the discussion goes on, it'll come to me more. But there's an apathy of avoiding the conversation, and there's a neutrality of, maybe better said would be, this person is resistant. So going back and forth and discussing it doesn't make sense right now. So let me speak. Let me ask questions. Let me just discuss this topic. Like, there is a difference between apathy and neutrality.
Yeah. Well, that's why I don't know that I'm following because apathy is a lack of interest and you don't care.
Yeah.
Neutrality is not neutrality is being in between two things.
Yes.
So
Um,
the two things aren't actually the same. If you don't care, you're not between two things. If you're neutral, you're between two things. Like, for example, the joke has always been that Switzerland was a neutral country because they didn't get in the middle of other conflicts. That meant that they didn't put themselves in a position to choose a side. Whereas apathy is, I don't care about whatever it is that you've chosen sides about.
yes. So, like a lot of people will say, like, I'm not political, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't be. And what I guess maybe another angle to come at this is apathy is like, I don't talk about politics and religion. Neutrality would be like, I'd like to learn more, and it's a genuine interest. But apathy is often disguised as neutrality because I think people will say, it's still not coming to me on how I've discussed this so many times, but I'm not finding the words right now. But essentially, because I look at I always talk about David Hawkins' chart of consciousness. And I think apathy and neutrality is a higher place. Neutrality is like, I'm not here to take sides on the left or the right. But people in apathy will be like, I'm not on the left and the right. But someone who is in neutrality is like, I'm not on the left and the right, but I'm interested in truth. So I want to hear both sides and they're genuinely interested in growing. But I think the enemy will also hide there as well. So that's why I say apathy is disguised as neutrality, because people will say, I don't want to talk about politics and religion because they don't want to take a side. Both apathy and neutrality are not the standard. The standard is truth. So, and to get to there, it also requires an element of courage. So neutrality, right above neutrality, is courage. And courage is the courage to take a side. Because the paradox is that, you don't want to take sides, but ultimately you have to take a side because neutrality ultimately, to your point, is it's lukewarm. I'm not taking a side, so I'm just playing the neutral.
Let me ask you this. If there is universal truth, be it God's word or your belief in science or what have you, then there's no such thing as neutrality in the form of philosophy.
Correct.
Because there's no way to quantify the world without choosing a definition. And that's part of the problem, is I think it's applying a term that doesn't quite fit the situation, and we're trying to reason. We're trying to fit the square peg into the round hole here, because apathy is an emotion, or rather the negative response of emotion. It's the lack of emotion. I don't care. This thing does not interest me. I have no enthusiasm for it. For example, I have apathy for green bean casserole. I lack interest in it. I don't want it. I have no enthusiasm for it. But to say, like, how could you live in apathy for, say, the function of the world? You can live in apathy for God, which is incorrect, but it is possible to do so. You can have no enthusiasm, no interest in God, but you would therefore, in order to exist in the world, have to be able to quantify it in some way, which means you would lean towards something other than God as the universal truth. And that could be, for example, science. So it's not the universal lack of something, because people who have apathy for everything, that they commit suicide. They've removed themselves from the world because they see no function to it. So there's no way for a person to function in apathy. You have to have some sort of enthusiasm, interest, some sort of care for how the world you live in functions in order to continue to exist in it. From a philosophical standpoint, then you're choosing a side. So the word apathy doesn't even work. Neutrality doesn't even work in that regard. Using in the definition that we used it, not choosing a side. You have to choose one in this specific instance. There's no way to exist in the world without quantifying it as God's creation or science's creation.
Yeah, you have to decide. I guess I look at neutrality as because I think our level of bias can be so much. I mean, generally people just take politics, lean to the left or the right. So apathy is, I'm not even going to listen to a Republican says. Other side, I'm not even going to listen to what this Democrat says because they're wrong.
I feel like
Neutrality,
that's more a function of the media. and its
Yeah.
influence on the way that we perceive things. Because if you really pay attention to the detailed nuance, good journalists mention the details. Bad journalists don't, in order to generate shock. So they say the right, which is a catch-all blanket term. But there, if you look at the political spectrum itself, there are tons of other delineations within. There's, left, there's right of center, which is I have a centrist mentality, but I lean more towards conservative values. Just the values part, not the politics part, the values part. Then you have the far right, which is meant to say I only believe in the conservative values, traditions, and laws, and everything else is wrong. That's what they say the far right is, the extreme side, and that's what people talk about. So it's less that the world is made up of extremes, and more that the extremes are what attention is brought to. So that's what people see. And as we know of the world, people react to what they see. They don't react to what they don't see. The invisible goes invisible. That's the whole point of the word. Unseen, unnoticed. For example, you watch YouTube, you're going to come across some sort of video that talks that has somebody talking about how awful men are. You find a video where it talks about how awful women are, and it paints it as all women and all men. But if you walk out your front door, your general interactions with men and women are pretty chill. But if you sit in your house 24/7, 365, and just look through the window of YouTube, your assumption of the world is that all women and all men are bad and rude, and they're going to try to hurt you. It's a lie, but you wouldn't know that unless you went and experienced it for yourself.
Would it be fair to say in this example, someone who's apathetic, let's just say all men are bad, all women are bad. Apathetic person doesn't want to even hear the other side. Neutrality says, all right, well, takes two people from both sides and says, why do you believe it? And genuinely listens to both. And then the ultimate, that's why I say you can't be in the lukewarm. On the top would be like, okay, now you're making truth claims.
Well,
like,
there's problem number one with what you said is that's not apathy. Apathy would be not caring, period. Which means neither of the extremes matter. They have no relevance to me. I have no interest in either of them. Men are bad or men are good. No one cares. The apathetic person does not care one way or the other, so they don't choose a side. That's where your neutrality thing came from, I believe, is that a truly apathetic person isn't interested in it at all, one way or the other. A person who is being intentionally ignorant, for lack of a better term, is totally ignoring the other side of the argument in favor of confirmation bias on what they believe. That's not apathy. And it's not neutrality.
So what would that be? Because if aren't they apathetic to not knowing, hearing the other, wouldn't that be, I don't care what the other side has to say?
Well, yeah, but the part that's being dropped off of that sentence is I don't care what the other side has to say because I believe this. Whereas an apathetic person is I don't care what either side has to say because I don't believe any of it. Because I don't care about whether or not it's true or not. That's the difference. In this statement, the person already believes this side is true, so they refuse to hear the other side. that might challenge what they believe to be true. An apathetic person isn't looking for truth at all, and that's why they can't function in the world.
I'll have to reflect on it more.
Like, that is what depression is. Depression is a lack of care. That's full apathy. I don't care about my health. I don't care about my mental sanity. I don't care about my position in the world. I don't care about my existence in the world. And therefore, I remove myself from it.
So, I mean, maybe it would just be fear, but I guess for me, and I can work on the words. There's just two wordsmiths here.
Yeah.
Daniel is ahead of the game as far as that goes. I look at it.
I love words.
Yeah. I mean, that's in part why big part why you're a writer. But I think for me, I guess to kind of get out of all this mumbo jumbo for a second, because this is me and Daniel's forte diving into this, but to kind of zone it out is that for me, what I saw was essentially, we could break it down easily in this sense, is in the sense that there was two types of people, and we're all growing. So I don't want to just say that that's where they'll always be, but essentially one who was afraid to speak about politics and religion, and
Mhm.
one who wasn't. And I think the vast majority of people are, and maybe that's changed, but they're afraid to touch these topics. And at the root of it, I think David Hawkins makes a good point. It's like at the root of it is it's a fear of death. Because throughout time, I mean, why is that one of the biggest fears? Because to be hated and shamed and all that. But when you get over that,
wouldn't it be
what's
a
up?
fear of destruction then? Not so
Yeah.
much death as just destruction. Is even in the context of speaking about what you believe in, the fear would not, at least in the modern times, not so much be that someone would stab you in the heart or cut your head off, but they would respond in a way that could destroy your comfort. For example, cancel culture. If I don't like what you say, I go complain to your job and you get fired. That's the destruction of your income, and that destabilizes your comfort, your place in the world.
Yeah, take the word
So,
crucifixion. Crucifixion does not mean today what it meant
right,
years ago.
exactly. So it's more fear of destruction than it is fear of death per se, at least in the
Yeah,
modern world.
yes, people can be controlled by that, but I think if you take that to its extreme, there are people who are persecuted for that, who transcend that level, let's say. Because
Yeah,
once
you're
you
right.
get
They could view these things as forms of death.
But it's an important point because that's how easily people can be controlled today, and I recognize it within myself, and it was something that I had to overcome just by talking, I mean, for example, speaking about struggling with porn. I
Mhm.
wrestled with that for a little bit because I was like, do I want to talk about that? Because it got personal, and I think there is a distinction between being radically open and telling everyone about all your problems, and being open to a sense of like, oh, I know I'm not the only one struggling with this. Get it? What's the worst thing that can happen? It is true. It's better
Mhm.
I, expose that voluntarily than try to pretend, oh, I have all the answers, because there's an empathetic part. It's like, I'm not special in that regard, as you say. It's everybody has their favorite sin. So
True.
let's speak about it. Let's talk about it. And part of that was, well, are other people going to? Well, who cares what other people think? Because generally, people who are going to judge, because there is right judgment, but the quick to judge, let's say, instead of understand, those that's not someone who is, I would say, on the path. If they're quick to, oh, look how bad that person is, it's more of just this element of um, playing God rather than to
Right.
understand first. But you have to have judgment within it, right? Like the judgment would be porn is bad. Okay, that goes without saying.
Yeah,
Um,
there's two forms of judgment, and people get them muddied. The natural judgment is, will this thing that I'm about to do kill me? Yes or no? And in my opinion, that's a good judgment. That's a survival instinct. And if you believe in the Christian doctrine, we were created and told to live and propagate. So our base job, as God gave it to us, was to survive. So looking at things and judging whether or not those things are a danger to our survival is a good thing. Then there's interpersonal judgment. And that's the part that Christian doctrine speaks of when it talks about agape, unconditional love. There's no interpersonal judgment in agape. A person sinning is still a person and therefore is worthy of our love and care and kindness. Doesn't mean we let them do the sin. It just means that we speak to them from a place of caring, not a place of judgment. So it's not, don't masturbate, you gross pervert. It's,
Yes.
you have an issue with masturbation. Let me help you get over it. I want to extend my kindness and my grace to you to help you overcome this challenge. That's the difference. There is good judgment, and there is misused judgment when it comes to the interpersonal. That's the people who wag their fingers at everyone.
Yeah, and what came to my mind often was give the devil his due, which is kind of why I played that clip for you, because the enemy is cunning and the enemy is going to make all these, part his job is to make the ephemeral seem eternal. I
Yeah.
think that's a fair statement because you take it lust or pride in that moment, you feel there's an element of superior. You feel good. You feel like invulnerable in that moment. But over time, take even pride. Look, I'm number one. You put that energy out, now you're competing with everybody else, and now it's not sustainable. That's why I love the but there's two paradoxes also that come to mind is that in order to live, you must die. And he who is first will be last, and the last will be first. And I when I think of that last will be first, so many times about it to me, that's one of Christ's bangers that's just really stuck with me in the sense that when I find that thought creep in, it's just like, oh yeah, I want to be number one. I recognize in almost all situations when I truly mean it, right? Because you can just say it, but when I truly mean it, it's like when I humble myself, I watch how people humble themselves as well,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't always happen, right? It could be received as, oh yeah, he's lower than me, I'm good,
Yeah.
and that's fine. I don't care how that's received, but when it's genuine in that position, it's just like it's so powerful.
True.
But yeah, the in order to live, you must die to yourself. That part. To my point earlier, it is very painful, but the pain isn't real. It's the death of what is false. And when pride is uprooted, and you know, I think that's much of the world, right? You said media. You think about decades of if you drive this truck, you're a man. If you do this, you're a man. And the same for opposite generations of believing into a lie.
What's really fun about that specifically is, I'm going to take you down this rabbit hole with me because I've gone through this one. The example, if you drive this truck, you're a man. What is that saying?
Uh, I mean, uh, your masculinity is tied to an object.
Okay, that's the simple generic form of it, and this is what makes it so interesting. Now, do what we do in all of our calls. Take it back to a child. Why would you drive that truck?
I want to be liked.
Okay, well then there's where it breaks down and it becomes wrong. But the true answer behind that, and the cool part about it, is the people who want to drive that truck have a use for that truck. And what is the use for that truck? The ability to haul more objects to create with. Because you can't fit as many things in a car. That's the whole point of a truck in the first place, was to load more material inside. It's like, think about it. The hand cart was one of the early forms of moving large quantities of objects. It was replaced by the carriage, which is a horse or two attached to a hand cart so that you don't have to push it yourself anymore, and therefore you can make it larger so that more objects can be put inside. So the actual question that's being posed with, if you buy this truck, you're a man, is, are you doing things that men are expected to do? And if you are, you need this truck because it allows you to do those things better. Like any tool. I can use a stick to hammer a nail, but it's better to use a hammer. So underneath that generic, simple, if you own the truck, you're a man, is the question, are you being a man who needs something like this to do your job more effectively? Because would you rather carry 1,800 bundles of planks of wood by hand, or do you want to throw them in your truck and then go?
Yeah. But I think most people, it's hard to make a bold statement, but I think most people aren't looking.
They don't see it.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that's why I said when you answered the question, that's the wrong answer. Because it becomes about the object itself, not about what the object is doing. The tool is a tool. And we have this argument in the gun debate, the Second Amendment arguments. The tool is a tool. It's used for you to more effectively perform the tasks. So the truck is a tool. It's used for you to more effectively produce, do the things. But if you're looking at the truck as the result instead of the tool, then you're looking at it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something inside of the person. But everybody goes through that. At some point, the owner of the truck who's been driving around but not putting anything in the back of it is going to need to move something for a friend. Or they're going to need to carry equipment to their job. And they're going to throw it in the back of the truck and go, well, damn, it's a good thing I had this truck. Ding. There's the light bulb. Now you understand the function of the object that you purchased. Or they're trying to cram their equipment into the back of their car and going, I wish I had a truck.
I think it was Bill Burr. Bill Burr had it's good to, I don't know why it's popped in my head, but Bill Burr said it's good to know the guy who owns the boat, not have the boat yourself. You can break that. You could argue it. I mean, just the joke itself is just rooted in that.
We were talking about that yesterday in the Saturday call, which you didn't show up for, by the way.
No, I did not. I had a very deep sleep, much needed.
Good. I'm glad. Sleep is important. But yeah, we were talking about that. I used to be a personal assistant to a very rich man. Owns 20-some businesses in the tri-state area. And I was telling everybody in the call that one of the first things I learned about this guy is money doesn't exchange hands with him. He is incredibly wealthy, but he never trades money. He trades favor. I have access to all of these resources, and you have a job that needs to get done. I have a job that needs to get done. You help me with my job. I'll share my resources so that you can get your job done more effectively. And that is his modus operandi. He doesn't throw cash. I only time I ever saw him spend money was on food. But he was constantly doing things to increase the productivity and effectiveness of his businesses just through networking. And I think that's what Bill Burr was saying.
Yeah.
I could have the boat, but I'm not making much use of it as an individual person. Or I can know the guy who has the boat, and therefore I can call him and say, hey, can I borrow it? And in return,
Yeah.
I'll do this for you. And I took that into my businesses and started talking with people that I come across, like, I won't go into detail because I don't know if he'd appreciate it, but I have a client who also does a service for me. So I told him I would help him as a client, and we just apply what would be my fee to the next service that he does for me. So I pay him less and he gets something now that he needs. No money exchanges hands at that point, because I'm not worried about the cash itself. I'm worried about being able to effectively produce the things that I need to produce in any of my businesses.
It's an interesting concept because I think
Right.
operating as if money doesn't exist can actually bring you, because people think, what can I, it goes back to the Christian principle, what can I get out of it? But you hear
Mhm.
countless stories of, I mean, at least listening to a lot of like Jim Rohn stuff, a lot of people who are just, hey, you know what? Can I get a job? No, we don't have any spots. Well, can I come in for free and just sweep the floors? I don't
Right.
even have to get paid. I need something to do. How many is those stories I'll hear that people will end up getting a job, and because they're such a hard worker, they're showing up on time and they're doing something for nothing. They're providing a service. And if you do a great job cleaning the store or whatever and doing that for, a month, well, wow, this
And
place is
they're there when
fantastic.
the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you're sitting in your apartment or your house or your room all day long, the opportunities are outside of those walls. So you're not going to be present for them. But the person who goes out and applies themselves to the situation, they're there for the opportunity when it appears, and then they're first in line. And this all goes back to Jesus. This is why Jesus and the disciples wandered the countryside. They were always on the move because that's where the opportunities were. Fishermen, they don't go and fish in the same exact spot every day. And it's part of why the fishers of men concept is so interesting, is an actual fisherman knows that if you keep going to the same spot over and over and over again and throw your line, eventually the fish are going to be like, yeah, there's a thing in that area of the water that keeps taking us out of it. Don't go over there.
Yeah. And
So
and
the fisherman has to learn to move, go where the fish are.
yeah, well, two things. Well, one was when I was driving Uber, I met a whole bunch of different people. There was this one older gentleman. It was a long trip. It was like an hour. So we had some time to talk. And generally, when I had picked up someone older, I would always ask, like, what's the most important lesson you've learned in your life or whatever. And he thought about it for a second. And then he said, most important is just show up, showing up every day. And I remember I dropped this guy off. I seemed like a wise man. I dropped him off and he walked. It was almost like a field. That it was like a party. They were having a celebration. There was a lot of people. And he got out of the car and he was welcomed by all these different people. So it was like a scene out of a movie. I dropped this guy off
Mhm.
and it was just like something that always stuck with me. It was like just showing up. Um, and that the second thing that came to mind was that when Christ's disciple catches all those fish, it's that action. right? Because
Mhm.
there's, especially now, I think there's the tendency, like, let's just, speak the word of God for sure, but showing up and having those opportunities, and just being at the right place at the right time can really shift someone's view without you speaking a word about Christ. That can become secondary. Could also be the primary. You could be speaking about Christ and your words move somebody into his direction, but I would say oftentimes it's not that. It's just some
Mhm.
action. And then there's a curiosity. Oh, what do you believe? Why do and it can open up in a different way as a
Yep.
byproduct of your actions, if not more,
Yeah.
right?
But most people prefer to react than to act. But a reaction requires an action. A reaction requires a catalyst. That's science. Something has to happen for you to react to it first. So if you spend your life just trying to react to things, they're not going to happen as often as if you went out and just acted. The percentage of consequence, for lack of a better word, is higher if you have actions than if you just spend your life waiting to react.
Yeah. And with that is grows the ability to respond, because actions are going to breed failure. And as you fail, the more you fail, the more you're able to,
That's a
um,
reaction. Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
ability to respond. So my father's favorite words, that and appreciation and responsibility.
Yep. Yeah. That's absolutely fascinating working with that guy. And he, just like the gentleman you were talking about, he would talk to anybody, didn't matter who they were, total strangers, just converse. And during the course of conversation, he would find something that they were struggling with, and he would say, well, I can help you with that. And he would say, and if you wouldn't mind, you could help me out with this because I can't do this myself. And just boom, instantly connection made. Two people got the things that they needed done, finished, no money changed hands. And it was always like simple little stuff, like, you need to move these objects into a new warehouse. Well, I've got guys. They can be here in 15 minutes, and they'll bring 3 vans. Now somebody else could think, well, that's money because they have to pay for the gas and you're paying them for the time. No, it's because he had access to all of these resources that allowed him to affect the outcome for another person, and then in turn the other person affects the outcome for what he's working on.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first started working for him, he told me he was going to pay me, hourly for this stuff, and this is how much money I was going to make. And I was like, okay. And my brain immediately thought, all right, well, on this day he's going to give me a paycheck. I show up expecting my paycheck. We go through the entire workday, and he doesn't give me anything. So at the end of the day, I said, okay, well, when do I get paid for the work? And he goes, oh, you can go get paid now if you want. And I was like, okay. He goes, go talk to this person. And he gives me their name and where they are, what building they're in. And I'm like, well, I'm standing here in front of you. Why can't you just pay me? And then I realized he doesn't deal in money. He has people who deal in money on his behalf.
Interesting. So he had a client.
No, he had workers. I went to this other location. I told them who I was,
Yeah.
and they said, okay. And they wrote me a check for it.
Oh, okay. Got you.
So he doesn't deal in money. That's the magic of this
Gotcha.
dude. He's like one of the wealthiest people I have ever met. He's multiple, properties that he owns that are both personal and business. And he doesn't touch money except to pay for food. If I need to get paid, I go to this other person and they pay me, and it comes out of this this business account. But he personally doesn't have anything to do with it. And if I don't go to that person, I don't get paid. It's surreal.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's yeah, I think that's networking is definitely an important thing. I recognized that pretty quick as I was making videos and like how it
Right?
quickly connected. But it also made me think of the dark side of it as well, because you think of I mean, now there's so much like CIA, FBI, and then you think of politicians and how they deal in favors, and I mean definitely money as well, but it just makes it, that's why I've been fascinated with that meme. I can try to find it real quick. The
What it
IQ
what it
meme.
illustrated to me though, watching him, was that he built a community, a vast network out of just doing favors. And the bigger his personal sphere of influence got, the more favors he could do for people and the more people he knew. And it's the same thing when he showed up at places. It was like Norm from Cheers. They all knew who he was, but I lived in the same area for decades, never heard of the man until I met him and started working for him. But as I'm around with him, everybody reacted as if they were his best friend.
Yeah.
They never said, "Oh, you should really meet this person," when I was talking to them before. And he has this, when I met him, he's very old. So he's this little old dude who has this huge gravity around him.
Did you ever ask him about it? Did you ever dive into it? Like what led to that?
Well, we talked about it. I think for at one point when I told him I was a writer, he started telling me stories about everything and how he built the businesses up and all this stuff. And I think his idea was, when I pass, this guy's going to write my book for me. Which is why he did that. I mean, I could see it in his mind. That was what he was thinking.
Yeah.
Was, if I just fill his head with stories about my life, eventually he'll write my biography after I die. Yeah. But yeah, he would just talk about it. And the funny thing is, he started out in the same profession I did. He was a teacher.
Hmm.
And it didn't work for him, and he moved out of it and found his own way into being incredibly wealthy and never having to worry about money, because he retooled his entire life around favor. And because he did that, he had money, lots of it, didn't know what to do with most of it, but he never made it the focus of his existence. The
Do you
focus of
still
his
speak to him
existence was favor.
often?
Oh yeah, we go to lunch. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, he's a cool dude. I love him. He's getting, like, he was old when I first met him, so he's really getting up there. I think at this point, last time we talked, I believe he was trying to set up his son to take over, because he's reaching a point where he can't physically move as much as he used to. And that's kind of been his thing. You think of it like a shark, if they stop swimming, they die. For him, it was, if he stops moving from place to place, making sure everything's running, then somebody else is going to have to do it, or else all the businesses start to fail. Because I know from being a multiple business owner, if you stop paying attention to the operations of any one of your companies, human nature kicks in and people start slacking off, and that leads to the death of it. So for him, it was more a matter of, I'm going to keep moving until I physically can't anymore, and then I have to pick somebody to do it for me.
Yeah, it makes me think of like also a starting point. I think volunteer work as well, because it's you, what was the movie? It was I mean, you can see it really in any great movie. It's like I apply this view to people that, and I believe it's a true view, is 100%, is that you never know how the characters in your life will play out. Your
Oh
closest
yeah.
friends can betray you, and the outcast in your life can end up being the ultimate hero, and your small act of kindness was one of the biggest. They were at the lowest point in their life, and your kind words turned their life around because they had nobody in their life to, but you believed in them or whatever it is. And that's why I definitely, you know, I couldn't agree more. I mean, networking and not networking for the sake of networking, which you're not
Right.
saying. I'm not saying, oh, I know this person. Look at all my resources.
Yeah, if your mind is about the people, and that I think is surprisingly is probably the closest I've ever come to witnessing actual agape in the
Yeah,
world, is that his mind was on what he could do for people to make their lives better, and they in turn made his life better.
yeah,
Profound way of looking at the world. It's all about that mindset. But nowadays we have people are more interested in the arbitrary number in their bank account than in the people around them, and then they wonder why they feel so lonely and sad.
yep. It's a tale as old as time. Ebenezer Scrooge, right? um,
Yep.
Coming up to an hour point, I'm gonna try to close it in. I wanted to bring up this meme that we've been
Yeah,
talking
show
about
me.
for weeks. Um, Give me one sec here. That's just not gonna open. This is it's the IQ meme. I have it here. This is just one example of many. I mean,
Mhm.
this applied to me when I started making my my channel. I
You
don't have
need
a
to have a
plan.
complex content strategy.
Yeah, you need to have
Everything
the
has to
best.
be a sales funnel.
And there's so many of these. If you just type in IQ meme, there's
Yep.
so many, and there's a lot of religious based ones as well. Um, I think there's just this element. I don't have a plan. To me, looking through that as a Christian lens, it's like it's God's plan, which I don't know. I will not know his full plan. Um, my human brain couldn't handle it. Um, but I think it's really interesting. It just ties in um, with so many of our conversations that I look at like on the bottom is like, I believe in God. And then someone higher up, just like, no, you can't sin, you can't do this. And it's just like, it almost becomes like a Pharisee kind of thing. You have to do this and you have to do this, you have to do that. And then on the bottom, it just trusting God, you know?
Yeah. Yep. And the
Uh,
Bible even says it, yeah, be like a child.
yeah. But I have a
And
question.
I think the meme actually would serve better without the really strange looking human on the left, and would just be a child instead.
Hmm. Yeah, you could put a child on both sides.
That's just me. Well, no, I mean, if you think about it, everything that we do as people, this is one of the great and glorious flaws of human nature, is that we're given a simple concept that is true. We have to complicate it before we actually understand that it was true in the first place.
Yeah, that was my question. Do we have to complicate it? And
Yes, we
I've been
do.
wrestling with it. Yes, we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why?
Every story ever told throughout the course of time, even including the Bible, is about humans overcomplicating God's truth and then realizing that it was God's truth all along.
Yeah, I've been reflecting on it. Do we have to digest it? Is that what it is? It's like the spiritual digestion process, integration with our human mind.
Possibly, I attribute it because you know me, I always go back to the roots. I attribute it to the knowledge from the fruit of the tree of
Yeah.
good and evil. That first mistake became human nature. Adam and Eve chose to eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so every person that came from that, all the way back to the beginning, has to fail in order to know. because innocence is ignorance of the knowledge. You just accept that which is given to you. That's what Adam and Eve did before the tree. God gave them everything, and they never needed to know. They simply existed, pure bliss. And they say ignorance is bliss. But after the tree, they learned. Now they had knowledge. Because of that failure, that mistake, they now had knowledge and still recognized that making the mistake was the wrong choice, hence mistake. So every human has to screw it up in order to realize what the truth really is, even though they already know the truth. We all doubt. We're all doubting Thomas. That's what it is. But faith is being like a child. Faith is being like Adam and Eve before the tree. God gives, and that's all we need to know. God gives us life. God gives us food. God gives us the ability to live, to exist in the material world. All things have been provided to us. We complicate them ourselves. Has nothing to do with God.
Where would you tell somebody to, because we were talking about this on the call, where would you, what we were discussing, um, if you're at a point in your life, because I always try to plant these seeds in these calls, because I always found, like years ago, I'd always watch like documentaries, and then I was like, I even see the propaganda in so many of them now, but um, I'd always be left with like the world's going to be destroyed because of us, and there's nothing we can do except, I don't know, donate to some organization or whatever. So I was always left with this dooms kind of,
Climate change.
yeah, climate change. And so I always kind of want to plant seeds from people's experiences. Like, where would you say is a good starting point? Because for the Bible, it's a big book,
Always.
and it's, where would you, someone's questioning, you're saying, hey, you know what, like, I don't know where to look. It's a big book. Where do I start? What would you say?
Start with Genesis. Always. We have this conversation a lot, you and me. Things that you bring up from the New Testament, I always go back to the Old Testament and look for the root, because context for us as the beings that must complicate everything, we look for that proof. And to me, the root of all things is the proof. Where did something come from? The definition of the term. That's why when we start talking about what things are, I look at the word and then I go back to as far back linguistically as possible, which is usually Latin. What did that word mean way back in the beginning when the words were first put on paper? Not what it means now, because we've changed the meaning of things so much in the modern time
It's like
that
a game of
words don't,
telephone in
that
actual
words
time.
don't function the way they used to. So if I go back to the original definition, when those words were first conceptualized into concepts that we can understand, then I have a better chance of learning what that really means. What was it? The word patriarchy, patri, father, leader, role model, archis, tribe, family, group. So it just literally means the role model and leader of a group, or the father of a family, or just the leader and role model of a tribe. Doesn't necessarily mean all men, because some men are not leaders. It's not their job. Only specific people are patriarchs. So the patriarchy isn't real because all men are not patriarchs.
Patriarch isn't real in today's terms, you're saying?
Yeah.
Down with the patriarchy?
Yeah. Well, the concept that men are holding women down.
Yeah.
And it's just a blanket thing. All men are trying to subdue all women. No. Because even back in the original concept of the term, yes, all men have the capacity to become patriarchs if they have children and therefore become the father of a family. But do all men have families? No. And what was the purpose of a patriarch? Role model, that which you are to look at as the standard for good behavior as a leader. So men who choose not to do the right thing for their families are not role models. Therefore, they are not patriarchs. Men who walk away from their families are not patriarchs. So in the modern term, the patriarchy, the system where all men oppress all women, not real. Never existed. And you take that back to Genesis. Eve was created from Adam, given by God to support Adam, but Adam was called to protect that which came from him. The first father, or I should say the first human father, because God is the father of all. But the first human father was given an edict. This came from you. It's a part of you. Take care of it. Applies to children. This came from you. It's a part of you. Take care of it. So yeah, I go all the way back to the beginning with everything.
Yeah. Christ is the church. Or how does it go? It's a little foggy today. It's we're as far as we're called to follow Christ, as far as sacrificial for women. I forgot the exact quote. It's fleeting my head today.
It's okay. If you're looking for hierarchy, God's will works through Jesus Christ. Man follows Jesus Christ in order to become, quote unquote, God-like, which is to emulate God. Woman follows man as Eve followed Adam. So God, Christ, man, woman. But for some reason, the assumption that women are to follow man means that men are supposed to have some sort of dominion over them, which is a bastardization of the concept, because God has agape. Right, because God has agape, unconditional love and care for all things, given through Christ. So Christ said, love all man, care for all man, call out sin, but still care for all man. And if you are supposed to emulate Christ in order to become closer to God, then you are to love all man, care for all women, love all women, call out sin. But for whatever reason, our modern culture has said women don't need to be beholden in any way, so they don't need to be godlike. But the women who choose to follow the traditional hierarchy of Christian doctrine, they let man lead them as long as man is worthy of leading them. That's how the system was designed to work. If a man is not being Christ-like, woman doesn't need to follow him. So if men want women to be more like what they assume women are supposed to be like, they should be pursuing a Christ-like life.
Christ is the head of the church, and the church is often symbolized as a bride with Christ as her husband.
Right. But that's man overcomplicating the simple, which is God is the way, God is truth. Christ takes you to the truth. And if you are on the path to the truth, then woman would follow in order to reach the truth as well. And children would follow to reach the truth as well.
I met with a priest a while back when my mind was at absolute, that pie chart, or that chart, not the pie chart, the graph. I was at the peak. It was a much steeper, all this, and then now I'm starting to come down. And I think that down process is an element of dying to yourself. Still have some work to do, but I remember him saying, and he just listened to what I had to say. And I'm looking for like a complex thing, because I'm looking at this was like peak COVID. And he's not seeing what I'm seeing, so different, older gentleman, different generation. He's not on the social. Maybe he is, I don't know. But I would assume that he's not seeing the bombardment of information that I'm seeing and how much we're being lied to. And remember at the end of the conversation, he just said, follow God. And I'm sitting there leaving like I want a more detailed prescription. And I said, that's it? That's it. And he's just like, follow God.
Yeah.
He had the answer. He had the cape on the right.
But the truth of the matter is, social media is just the newest form. The world has always tried to lie to us. We're people. We are flawed. We are not godlike. Our job is to try to be as close to God before we die, but we are never going to be God. That's the rub. It's a matter of trying. The general populace does have it right. It's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up. So you apply that to the pursuit of faith. God's not looking for you to show up at the pearly gates looking like him, but he wants to see through the course of your life that you tried with all of your heart and your intention. That's a big thing in Catholicism, is the intention of things. And I think a lot of denominations, unfortunately, have lost that ground. That very important part of faith is the intention behind it. There's a general assumption that if you show up for your communion wafer, you can get away with anything.
Yeah.
Which is not true. The wafer is just a symbol. It's the intention within you that determines whether or not you are absolved of your sin. If you exist in your sin, you're not doing it right. If you're struggling against your sins on a consistent basis, that's what God's looking for. At least that's my interpretation of the text.
Is it always a struggle, or is it?
Oh, yeah. I think so. Hasn't been a moment in my life where it hasn't been a struggle. Granted, I'm only halfway through it, so maybe in 40 years, if I'm still alive, we'll revisit this topic.
Yeah. No, I think perhaps it's a different struggle, because it's like you get to the proverbial top, but even then, you take like a king or something. He worked his way up to become a king, But just because he's a king doesn't mean it stops. He can quickly not become the king if if he's corrupt or whatever. It's just a different, you're an employee, and you
Yeah,
become CEO. It's, you know, if anything, it gets
the struggles
harder.
don't, yeah, the struggles don't stop.
Yeah.
They just shift based on where you are on the chessboard of life.
But maybe the struggle too is a surrender. And what I mean is that we don't have to complicate the struggle. So it becomes easier and harder at the same time. Meaning that I always like to look at if this, then that kind of
Mhm.
inputs in my life. And it always, a
Very
big part of
human
it,
concept.
yeah, serenity prayer. Can I control this? No, don't worry about it. And you believe that and attach yourself to that root more, that it it doesn't become easier, but your response to it does.
Yeah, and real quick, the, the purpose of the serenity prayer is not so that you don't care about the things you can't control. It's that you give them up to God. It's a prayer.
Yes.
God, I have no control over these things, so I let them go. I give them to you where they belong. It's a
Yes.
relief. It's a relief to the burdens that we carry in our hearts and minds as human beings, that we release the things that we have no control over back to God, and and not that we don't care about them. It's just letting them go so that we're not agonizing over the weight of them. Because for me, I don't think I have no control over these horrors that are happening across the ocean. Therefore, I don't care about them. Obviously, I care about what happens to other people. If it was happening in front of me, I would be horrified and probably cry. So my distance from it lessens some of that burden, but the burden is still there. I am concerned for the safety of my fellow man, but I have no control over it. So I release that concern to God, that He will take care of it, because that
Mhm.
is what He does. And it gives me the ability to take comfort and let go of the burden. I can put that weight down. It's not that it's not there, it's just on the floor instead of on my back.
Yeah, the full quote, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. But that second part is ties into what you just said, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace, taking as he did this sinful world, this is the key part, as it is, not as I would have it,
Mhm.
which isn't
Right.
it isn't an indifference, it's that that's the
Recognition.
surrender, trusting that he
Yep.
will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next.
Correct. That beautiful word, reasonably,
Yeah.
because even God knows that the world that He created is not for supreme happiness. It's the world that He lives in, that He's waiting for us at, where we will be supremely happy.
Interestingly, I remember seeing it was Shia LaBeouf talking about Christ, right? Because to the supremely happy, and maybe this is a discussion for another time, but he says, was he essentially, I don't remember the exact quote, but was he in like his fullest joy as he's being crucified? And he makes the argument, yes. I was reflecting on that because it's just like, talk about paradox, right? We want to be happy. We want supremely happy in a reasonable world, right? Where we get reasonable
Right.
happiness. And when we try to make it inverted, we suffer. And that's where there's this element of bearing your cross is actually the closest you'll be to that happiness in this world, which is like to the ego mind, it just like, what? I have to suffer. But it's like, and I think there's traps in there too. I've fallen into. I must
I think it
suffer in order to,
boils, yeah, I think it
but
boils down to be who you are, for better or worse,
yeah,
in the world. And that's the simplified version of what he was saying there. And to a certain extent, that would be true. Christ was fulfilling his purpose while on the cross. So he was being who he was, for better or worse, at all times, even in the moment of his death. And I can only hope that I do the same, that I am who I am meant to be, for better or worse, at the moment of my passing.
I think meant is key word there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If I've lived as just a life, as righteous a life as I possibly can at the moment of my passing, then I hope that's what happens. But Lord knows, in 10 years, I could fall completely off the path if I'm not paying attention. I can get sucked into 8 million different things. I could become a multimillionaire and get lost in greed. I don't know. The only thing I know is day to day. That's the most important thing for me. If I can lay my head down at night when I go to bed and not stay up for an hour thinking about all the things I did wrong, then I consider that a good day.
Any final thoughts for the pod on your mind? Anything you've been reflecting on in the past week or two? Been jumbling in your mind you want to share?
I reflect on a lot. I reflect on a lot during my conscious hours. Nothing really springs to mind other than, like we briefly talked about, the Bible is the word. It is our manual towards a righteous and just life. And no, it is not going to be easy. If you read the text, you'll know that everybody in it suffers in some way. So I take a bit of odd comfort in that. And that's the beauty of being a storyteller.
Well, that's in the Serenity, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace. You have to grow in that.
Right. So I look at all stories, even real ones, and I read those stories and go, okay, this person went through some serious struggle. And then I've realized the more books I read, man, everybody went through some serious struggle at some point in their life. And then I think to myself, well, I'm going through some serious struggle. I'm like everybody else. And then that's one of the fundamental issues that we all have, is that we feel like we're alone inside of our bodies. You know, that there's a joke. It's weird to think that we are a ball of, what is it? A ball of very vulnerable pink material trapped inside of a bone mech. But that's not true. That's an isolating sentence. If you're trapped inside of something, then you're kept away from everything else. But if you recognize that we all struggle in some way, it may not be the exact same for everyone, but everyone goes through a struggle or multiple struggles or some great struggle in their life. And we're not alone. We're all struggling together. That gives me comfort. The more I read, the more I learn that everyone goes through it.
We're all in recovery.
Yeah. We all go through it in some way. That helps me remember that I am not alone. I'm not a pink mass of tissue riding inside of a bone mech. I
have like that.
Yeah.
But I am not that.
Right.
Because if you identify with that, that's to your point, then that's all you are. And then it's pretty depressing.
Right. And that's where the world sits now, even on social media. Yeah, even on social media. Like, how many times a day do you scroll through, say, X and see somebody in a moment of weakness post that, I feel really alone right now. I don't feel like people see me. Well, it's a feeling. Feelings, unfortunately, are more often than not lies.
Yep.
And the actual truth behind that, you take the feeling away, is that we all see each other to some certain degree. No one ever goes completely unnoticed. They just assume that they are. And all it generally takes is 5 seconds to reach out to somebody, for better or worse. Because even being rejected is still connection. If you think about it, it's just a failure. But if you don't reach out to be rejected, then you've done nothing. That's your apathy. Nothing's happened. You go out there, you speak to 10 different people, say you're looking to, to start a relationship. You go out, you find 5 women that you're attracted to, you find them interesting. So you talk to them all. If they all reject you, okay, you've had 5 failures. So what? You got to evaluate the situation and continue on. Or you do absolutely nothing and you never get a relationship. And then you feel alone again. So you're back to square one. But it's easier on the psyche to live in the comfort of depression than it is to take the risk because of that fear. It's just overcomplicating the situation. Go back to the guy on the left of the meme.
Yeah, I have a PhD in that.
A PhD in deformed brain.
PhD in overcomplication. What did you say? PhD in what?
In deformed brain, because that's what the dude on the left looks like in that meme. Looks like he's all deformed.
I'd say PhD in both the left and the top. I think the PhD at the top, I mean, initially was like, it was pride. I'm more spiritually advanced. I remember hearing a term, spiritual ego. I really like that. I get it and they don't. And then that shifted to, maybe I've learned some things that a lot of people don't, but I don't have.
That is absolutely pride.
Yeah.
It is.
1000%.
We all go through it. I learned something new that somebody that you guys may not know. We have our Saturday conversations. I share that thing that I've learned, and you guys are like, oh shit, I never thought about it that way. I had a little twinge in the back of my head, like, yeah,
yep.
I'm the smart guy.
Yeah, and it shifted to a shame, which you've also said is another form of pride, which is true.
It is, yeah.
Because I went from that to I know more to I don't know anything to oh no, I definitely know more than some people in this area, but I don't hold a candle in the full knowledge of everything. So I meet every person where they're at, and I have something to teach them, and they have something to teach me. It's like Jordan Peterson's adage of, I mean, look at Good Will Hunting. I mean, I think it's another example of my little experiment of all the characters in your. A lot of people passed him as the janitor, and he was one of the most brilliant mathematicians in the whole school.
That's where I like to live. Is I know stuff, but I don't see stuff like everybody else. So I want to be interested in how everyone else is perceiving the things that I know. That's why I love these conversations, because you see things in a way that I don't. So I can know something, but you can add a new perspective to it that helps me know that thing even better.
Yeah.
And if I can surround myself with 10 people like that, then I am truly blessed.
Yeah, agreed. Well, what are we at here? About an hour and a half. We can end it here. Where can people find you? And what are you working on?
My only social that I actually pay attention to is X, which is at MISTERDPRILEY, Mr. DP Riley. Well, in about 2 days, the end of November moves into our Christmas month, which is my favorite month of the year. But I've also decided, since I was there's a thing that happens in November in the writing communities online called NaNoWriMo. And it's like National Novel Writing Month or something like that. But basically, everybody who writes stories really knuckles down and tries to produce as many words as possible in 1 month. I decided to be the rebel and not write at all in the month of November. And what happened was I came up with a ton of stories. So I've got 14 short stories, and I'm going to see how many of them I can write in the month of December. That's going to be my personal challenge for myself. I'll probably try to release them towards the end of the month. Hopefully I can do a full 12 days of short stories. We'll see. I just thought it would be fun to try. But
short stories, how long? How short?
Story takes as long as it takes. Just they're not novel length.
Gotcha.
It can be anywhere from 5,000 words to 30,000 words. It doesn't matter. A short story is just something that isn't novel sized. But that's what I do. I write. I teach people how to write and to write consistently and effectively through one of my businesses, which I've got listed right down there, Whimsyland Literary Coaching and Services. And on my Whimsyland website, whimsyland.org, I have an ebook shop now. If you're interested in my books, you can get them virtually for $5 each. Just nice flat fee. And check out what I've done. I've got the full G Sedai Angel War trilogy completed. I've got 2 books in my modern horror series, which is retelling of classic monsters with modern influence, some current culture topics and things like that. The most recent one, A Beast Unlike Any Other, deals with a young woman who is a natural born werewolf, but her mother had her on puberty blockers to repress the werewolf gene. So she grew up underdeveloped and chooses to rebel against all of that unwittingly, takes herself off of those drugs, and her regular physicality kicks in. She starts going through the werewolf change. It follows the old Wolfman story trope, but just twists it into a modern lens with a little bit of fun. Lots of stuff. Always writing. That's me.
Can confirm Daniel is a wordsmith, so I'm grateful that he helps sharpen my words, and we
Appreciate that.
It's true. Try to, I think a key point you made earlier, getting to the root of the words. I mean, even watching other people, the root, different languages and all that, there's just a lot to digest. So it's a process to understand that. The words that we speak, it's crazy when you realize, the word spelling. I remember hearing recently, it's a spell. You can cast a spell on somebody. You spell a word, right? It's, you say a word and somebody can believe in that. It has a power to it. And as you grow in that, I think it's a responsibility to choose your words carefully and continue to sharpen that sword. So.
Sharp mind is a wise mind.
Agreed. Well, thanks for joining me. Hope for more in the future. We'll keep pumping out Coffee and Christ, share his word, grow closer to him.
Yep. For now, bi-weekly, but Michael's trying to convince me to go weekly, so maybe we'll do that soon.
Yeah, we'll see. One day at a time.
Yep.
All right. Thanks again, Daniel. Look forward to the next one.
Happy to be here. Looking forward to more. I'm taking to calling you the pursuer of paradoxes.
Yes.
That's your official title now.
Pop.
There it is.